Hello everyone, my name is Seb van Leest and this is my first video in the series of chess basics. Here I shall be talking you through each piece, all of these ones, and of course all of the black pieces as well, what they're called, how they move, their advantages, disadvantages, and how to get the best out of each piece. But overall, of course, in chess, you need to attack the enemy king, and I shall be showing you how to do that with each piece in the second series, which is opening traps and tricks. This is how you see any chessboard. This is an online chessboard. Of course, it's not three-dimensional because we can't play in person. But if you're playing over the board, it's called OTB, over the board chess. Exactly the same setup. Your king and your queen next to each other. If you have the white pieces, your queen shall be, if you notice, on a white square. Let's see if I can. Here it's quite fun. I can change the board color. Quite cool. On chess.com it's great. This is probably clearer. Here we go. We've got the brown and white piece squares, as you can see. The queen is on the square of her own color. That's very important. You see the queen? She's on the square of her own color. That's very important because the queen is the most powerful piece. Therefore, she belongs on her own color. You see how the queens are opposite? That's correct. And the kings are opposite. That's how a chessboard should be set up correctly. The queen is the most powerful piece. So there's only one of her. The pawns are the weakest pieces. Therefore, there are 8 of those. If you notice, we also have 2 bishops, 2 knights, and rooks on the end. This is a rook. Some people may call it a castle. The correct chess term is a rook. R-O-O-K. Some people may call these horses. I mean, you can call it Larry if you like, but that's not its name. But the correct chess term is a knight. N-I-G-H-T. You can call these pointy heads, or you can call it Steve. They're both wrong. They're actually called a bishop. The chess term is a bishop. B-I-S-H-O-P. Think of the religious figure. These are not Lady Mary or Queen Elizabeth. They're just the Queen. There's one of them. Not always, but generally in a chess set, there shall be the second tallest piece. And of course, the tallest is the king. Kings and queens, the battle of royalty. Quite nice. So if I remove them from the board, bye-bye. And I shall take each piece from this selection, talk about what they do, how they move, and how to get the best out of each of those pieces. We shall start with not the bishop. Let's remove these yellows. That's a bit distracting. Let's start with the pawn. The pawns shall always go on the second. You see the number 2 here, and the 7th rank. I should briefly mention, very, very quickly, that these, you see the letters at the bottom of each of these arrows, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. They are called files. You have the A file, the B file, the C file, the D file, E, F, G, and H. They're not rows, columns, lines, no. They are called files. The letters are the files. This is the E file. That is the H file. That is the B file. You see the numbers 1 to 8 going up the board. You see them here? 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. They are the ranks. This is the 3rd rank of the chessboard. This is the 6th rank. That is the 8th rank. This is the 1st rank, and so on. And like any mathematical coordinates puzzle, or you're dealing with coordinates in maths, this, you'd always start along. Go along the corridor, you may have heard, and up and down the stairs. As so. So if I go along the corridor to the E file, well done, and up to the 5th rank, this would be E5. You see how we got there? We went from the letter E up 5 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Remember, because we started on the 1. We didn't go up 5, we went up 4, sorry. But we started on the 1, so that's 5. And we went 1, 2, 3, 4 along, but we started on A. And we end at E. So that square would be the E5 square. Another example, a B. I'm going to go to the B file now. And I'm going to go to the 8th rank. You see the 8 here? So that square would be called the B8 square. And you can do this with any square. That could be the C3. You see how I've gone to the C file and the 3rd rank. And here would be the H7 square because of the H file and the 7th rank. When you start a chessboard, white pieces, the white pawns, should always be on the 2nd rank of the chessboard. You see this number 2 in the corner? Nice and clear, hopefully. The pawns shall be on the 2nd rank. If the pawns have not moved, their first turn, you can move them 2 squares. You see these 2 circles indicating where the pieces can maneuver. If I put a knight briefly on the board and select it, it shows all the available squares for that piece, which is quite useful. Chess.com is free. Set up a free account, play around. It's a lot of fun. This pawn can move 2. It can move 1. I'm not saying it can't. It can move 1, but then you can't move it 2. It's had its first turn. You move on. You've had your first turn. Move on, buddy. Sorry. You move it 1. From that stage, it only moves 1 very slowly up the board, which can be quite dull. If they have not moved, they can move 2. Yay! But that pawn's already had its first turn, so I'm afraid the rest of its life, it has to shuffle 1 square at a time. Of course, why would you move a pawn 1 square when you can move it 2 squares? Generally, you would move a pawn 2 squares, just because you're gaining more space and more time. Einstein would like space and time advantage. Good boy. So, the pawns, they move forward, they cannot move backwards. You can't move a pawn here and think, I don't like it there, let's put it back. No, sorry. You move it 2, or you move it 1. That's the moving of the piece. To capture, people often use the word take. I'm going to take my opponent's piece, but the chess term is to capture. You capture your opponent's pieces. You don't capture their king. That's a whole different kettle of fish. But moving the pawns, they move straight down the board. They capture diagonally, which is a bit weird. You see the green arrow indicates where the pawn can move, but the red arrow indicates the squares that pawn shall be attacking. So if we start here, we look at this pawn. The green arrows indicate where it moves. As I said, it can move 2 on its first turn if you want it to. As it moves up the board, it will attack diagonally. So this pawn currently here, green to go, it moves here, red to attack. It attacks those squares. This pawn, for example, can only move to here. It can also move to there if it wants to move 2 at once. That's fine. But it attacks diagonally. If I move a pawn here, I moved it 2, it's its first turn. Yay! And now I'm attacking those squares. I can only move forward, but I attack diagonally. So from here, I attack those squares, and you can see my pawn very slowly moving up the board, attacking 2 different squares as it moves up the board. So the pawns can move 2, they can move 1, and they attack diagonally. Very important that. Black pawns shall always be on the 7th. You see the little 7 there? You see it? Good. You see the pawns. What am I doing? Board, behave yourself, please. That's not right. What have I done? Here we go. Mishap, that's fine. These pawns shall always, see the black pawns? I mean, they're very different. The color schemes. It can be blue and orange, pink and green. It's up to you. Generally, they're black and white. The black pawns, you see the 7? They should always be on the 7th rank. Indeed, not the 7th file or the E rank. No, the 2nd rank and the 7th rank. That's where the pawns belong. Exactly the same with black pawns. They move 2 or they move 1. Entirely up to you how you use them. And they attack the squares diagonal, so forward and to the right or left in front of them. Here, you go forward 1 and left or right. they are the squares that this pawn can attack. If I remove the arrows for you, show that in red. You see how I did that? I went forward one, took a right or a left turn. The squares I ended up on, they are the squares this pawn attacks. By the blue arrows show the pawn's range, the red arrows show the squares it is actually attacking. If a pawn moves here, this pawn isn't moved, it can move too. I cannot take this pawn. Remember, I move straight. The pawns only move in a straight line, but they attack diagonally. So they are the squares it is covering, like so. If you notice, the blue squares and the green squares are 4 different squares. So the 2 pawns control 4 different squares each. But let's have a different example. If I move this pawn 2 and move this pawn 2, remember I started on the second, I can move it 2, so I will. I am now attacking this pawn. Remember the diagonals? I can now capture this pawn. I'm up a pawn, yay! It's always nice. I'm up. All the pieces are known as material. So I will be up a pawn. You could say I'm up a pawn, up a knight, up a bishop, whatever. The term is up material. And then you can work out how much of an advantage that gives you. The pawns are the weakest. They move 2 or 1, attack diagonally. So if I go to here, and you go to there, 1 square out of my range, I can't attack it. Now if this pawn moved, of course it's white, steady Eddie. It's white to move. Remember, it's a turn game. I make a move, you make a move. Even if your position's really bad, I'm afraid you've got to make a move. You can't skip. Pawn moved. Now if I go here, you've stepped into my range. I can capture the pawn. Hehehe. But hold on. If I move this pawn and really want to put that pawn on that square, for whatever reason, I don't know, maybe you want to put the pawn on the d5 square. I don't know why you would, but if you really want to, you need to protect that pawn. So you'd play this pawn 1 or this pawn 1. It's entirely up to you. They're now defending this square. And I'll explain what that means once I restore black's pawn. You move this pawn here. That's 1 square, but hold on. I should explain. I shall move this 2. Again, attacking those squares. No defense at the moment, but this pawn attacks this square. When two opposition pieces are facing off against each other, it is attacking. But here, I move this 2. This pawn is not attacking its own piece. You can't attack your own pieces. Therefore, the term is defending. This pawn is defending this pawn. You see this pawn's range? Remember, the diagonal attack? I could capture, but this pawn was defending, so I can recapture. And so these pawns, what we would call, are locked. These pawns are locked. They can do nothing. No! I'm afraid they are powerless. Of course, black could simply push this pawn, maybe. It's white's turn, though. I could get this all wrong. You could push this, and then push this pawn, and then push this pawn. White plays it 2. Remember, this pawn's covering those squares, and this square is attacked and defended once. This pawn is attacking the square, but so is this one. So if I put a piece here, 1 and 1 is, equal. So 1 attacker and 1 defender, trading off the pieces as I go. And that's what it's called. It's called a trade. I take your piece, you take my piece. I take your pawn, like here. I can't do that because I just take a pawn and there are no defenders to recapture. I mean, you can, but it's bad. If I go here, you go there. 2, 2, 1 attacker, 1 defender. I capture your pawn, you capture mine. That is called an exchange. We have exchanged pawns. You see the E file? That is our E pawn, of course. And so the H pawn and the B pawn and so on. Neither player has their E pawn. They've traded it in the center. You see? Like so. So the pawns are the weakest piece. There are 8 of them. They're quite useful. They're often underrated, and especially towards the end of the game, they could become very, very important. The king. I'm going to quickly look at the king. This king is the most powerful. That's wrong. It's the most important piece on the board. The queen is the most powerful, but the king decides the game. In, well, every chess set I've come across, the king is the tallest piece, whether it's wood or plastic or marble or glass or cardboard or your mum's knitted one, whatever it may be, the king is the tallest piece. And it's got a little cross on its head. That's how you can tell it's the king. And the queen has a little sort of funky crown kind of thing. The horse, well, it looks like a horse. The rook looks like a castle, some sort of tower or pillar. And the bishop just looks a bit weird with a sort of pointed head thing. And the pawns are very, very basic. With the king, you see all of those squares I can move to. But you may ask, how can I do that? Well, with the king, I can move in any direction I want. But like a pawn, one square. Unlike a pawn, I can move backwards. Pawns, remember, only move forwards. The king can move any direction. You see those green arrows? They display all the direction of travel for my king. But remember, one square at a time. If I move this one, black to play. Select the black king. He can move to all of those squares. Well, I put him here. But remember this very important fact. You cannot put a king. Why is there no circle? You see these? There is no circle there. I cannot put a king. Okay, that's illegal. You can't put a king next to your opponent's king. You can't do that. Because here you would have your own king attacking and your opponent's king and your opponent's king attacking yours. That would be an illegal move in chess. Putting your king in danger. Putting your king in a position where it is attacked by an opponent's piece is an illegal chess move. If you do play it, that basically means you're resigning the game. If I have such a bad position, I put my king deliberately next to yours. Normally, I would just knock my king over gently, or online you click the resign button. But if I put my king next to yours, that basically means I'm resigning. I cannot win this game. I cannot see a way of defending. You're clearly winning. I am losing. I shall resign. So the king, any direction but one square. Pretty clear, right? Well, I think so. This is where the fun begins, though. The queens. Ha ha ha. The queen is like the king. In the respect, A, it's the same color. B, it can move any direction. But the main difference between the king and the queen, did you see that? Whoa. Look at all those circles. The main difference is it has unlimited range. It can move any direction. That's true. Horizontally, vertically, and diagonally. As many squares as it likes. It looks like some sort of bizarre octopus right in the middle of the board. These four squares are called the sweet center. Not the center, the sweet center. If you can get your pieces to attack the sweet center, control the sweet center of the board, then your position becomes better. Because then your opponent's pieces have to come round the outside. Therefore, there's less scope, and you are controlling, you're dominating the position. If you can get your pieces to these four squares. Very important that. You see the queen, I put her in this corner. Her range isn't great. She can go along here. She can go up there, along there, and that's it. Kind of run out. As you can see, in each corner, she only has 3 directions of travel. Not great. No. If I put her any square in the sweet center, she suddenly has 8 directions of travel, and even my maths knows 8 is better than 3. Unless it's weight. But yeah, in terms of piece moving, the queen can now travel in 8 different directions, as many squares as she likes. She's so powerful. But that's why there's only one of her. You don't get 2 queens, unless you're really special. No. Yeah, the queen, remember? She's a white queen, correct? Yeah, she's not blue or pink. She might be blue if she's ill. But that is a white square. So I'm going to pop my queen onto the square, and my queen onto that square. Black's on her side, the queen is on her color. Remember, the pawns go onto the 2nd and the 7th rank. The bishop Like the queen, has unlimited range. You see all those circles where the bishop can move to. Unlimited, fantastic. But there is a drawback. Like the king shuffling one square, the bishop has a big downside. You see how this bishop is on a light square? Well, it's currently on a blue square. No, it's on a white or light square. You see all those circles? They're all light squares as well. This would be white's light squared bishop. For the whole game, it shall stay on light squares. It could wander around the board and do as it pleases, whatever takes its mood. But if you look at all the squares I can move to, they are all white squares. This bishop, white's light squared bishop, can never pass onto a dark square. That's why you get two of them. Guess what the other one's called? No, it's not Harry. It's called the dark squared bishop. All those circles are on dark squares. Like the queen, and we shall come to the rook, they are long-ranged pieces. This bishop can sit in the corner, and so can this one. And look at all those circles. There's quite a few of them. The bishop can survey... Oh, come on. He's a bit camera shy. They can survey the entire chessboard. That's pretty cool. So can the queen. But there's one of her. There's two bishops. A dark squared bishop and a light squared bishop. So for the whole game, this bishop shall stay on the light squares. Way! Come on. There we go. And for the whole game, this bishop... In fact, let's get that clearer. This bishop shall stay on dark squares, and for the whole game, this bishop shall stay on light squares. That's why you get two of them. The rook, like the queen and the bishop, unlimited range. Well, 8 squares. You can't move it 10 because the chessboard is 8. I mean, you can move it 10 if you've got a bigger chessboard. But the chessboard is 8 squares. Try to get the color right. There we go. 8 squares there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 by 8 is 64. There are 64 squares on a chessboard, and probably the most famous chess player ever, his name was Bobby Fischer. You may have heard the name Bobby Fischer. His real name was Robert James Fischer. Bobby short for Robert. He died at the age of 50. No, he died at the age of 64. And he was probably the best chess player who ever lived. Coincidence? His death was the same number as his obsession. Bit weird. Strange. But like the bishop, this rook can move wherever it likes. Unlimited range. I can move to a dark square. I can move to a light square. But only one, like the bishop, only one direction of travel at a time. I personally think this queen is very, very lucky. She's so powerful. She can move in any direction. Dark squares, light squares, horizontally, vertically, diagonally. I mean, she can't do that because that's wrong. But as many squares as she likes. But that's why there's only one of her. You get 2 rooks. That's quite cool. You get 2 of these guys. Any direction, apart from diagonally, as many squares as you like. Which is quite useful. For any chessboard, these pieces, the rooks or the castles, it's up to you what you call them, they belong in the corner, facing off against each other. The knight's just weird. The knight is my favorite piece. People call it a horse, it's a knight. Okay, horse is acceptable. It's a knight, come on. This horse, you may be wondering, how are those squares circled? How does the knight travel to those squares? Well, you could either call it the weird L shape, or you could call it a 2-1. I'm going to move my knight 2 squares in one direction, horizontally or vertically. And if I've chosen horizontally first, like here, then I would have to change to vertically. But remember the 2-1. I have moved 2 squares. My horizontal 2. Now I have to change to vertical and the 1. There or there. So you see the blue square is where the knight started, and the red squares are where the knight can move to. You see how it goes 1 square, and another square in a different direction. So I move 2 squares in one direction, and then move one square in another direction. It looks a bit like a weird L. In fact, I can get the arrow to do that. That's quite cool. You see how those look a bit like a strange L, especially this bottom one. I've moved 2 squares in one direction, changed the direction, but only moved 1 square. And from this knight to that square, I draw 1 arrow and it makes an L shape. It does look a bit strange, but again, like the bishop, the rook, the queen, the king, the sweet center is where they belong. Eventually, the king, he takes his time to get into the limelight. I put a knight in the center of the board. Look at all their squares. There's 8 of them. Don't believe me? Fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Some sort of deranged octopus. But that is a pretty cool horse. If I put the knight on the side of the board. Oh, don't. Unless you have to, never put a knight on the side of the board. A knight on the rim is grim and dim. A knight on the rim of the board, the edge of the board, the knight on the rim is grim and dim. Never put a knight, unless you have to. Unless you've got a plan, never put him on the board. Never put him on the edge. The original term is a knight on the side, I shall not abide. But a knight on the rim is grim and dim is more fun. If I click on this knight, it has a range of, well, the range is the same, but it can only move to 4 squares. I thought I said I could move to 8. I did, but this knight's on the side of the board. Poor lad. If I put him in the corner, that's the worst place. You can only move to 2 squares. Oh dear, it's getting worse. It went from 8 to 4 to 2. So where did I have that 8? Remember, the sweet center. I put a knight. Get these knights. And again, you've got 2. You put them in the middle of the board. How many pieces does white have? 2. But let's look at all the squares this knight covers. They're all dark squares, aren't they? Yes. But this knight is currently on a white square. So the next move for any knight shall be onto a different colored square it's currently on. I'll explain that clearer. This knight is on a white square. Its next move, as you can clearly see, shall be on a dark square. Can move here, any of these, working our way around, and that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for 1 piece. It's pretty good with a limited range of 3 tiles: the queen, the rook, the bishop, unlimited range, up to 8 of course. The knight has a range of 3, but covering 8 squares is pretty cool. It gets cooler. Oh, it does. 2 knights. Well, if one knight covers 8 squares, and the other knight covers 8 squares, 2 times 8, it's pretty easy to do, is 16. This knight, the blue knight, covers all of these blue squares. How pretty. The green knight covers all of these green squares. That is quite amazing. That's 2 pieces covering 16 squares. The green knight covers all of the green squares I've highlighted, and the blue knight covers all of the blue squares I've highlighted. I can change the color to red if you want me to. It's up to you. I can change this to orange. Where's the orange? There it is. It really doesn't matter, but the power of 2 knights is pretty cool, especially when they're on a square in the sweet center of the board. Do you remember what I said earlier about the queen? She goes on her own color. You can rewind if you want. Right at the beginning of the video, we saw how these pieces were set up. The queen on her own color. The white queen is on a white square. The black queen is on a black square. The king's next to her. Hey girl. Again, opposing each other, ready to do battle. The pawns are on the 2nd rank. Hold on, not 2nd file. The letters are the files, A to H, and 1 to 8 are the ranks. The 2nd rank, the G file, the 5th rank, the C file, and so on. White pawns are always on the 2nd rank. Black pawns are always on the 7th rank. And there's 8 of them. The queen's the most powerful piece. You only get one of them. Sorry. The pawns are the weakest, you get 8 of them. They're disposable. Do what you like. No one cares. The knights, as I said, having 2 knights in the sweet center is pretty cool. You can have 3, but that would be cheating. You have these 2 knights here and here. And black, of course, has 2 knights there and there. Why are they here? Well, let me explain. These rooks. My friend explained it as a battlement. What do you have at the edge of your battlement? You have the towers, observing, scouting out the enemy. Therefore, you have your castles on the edge of your structure. You could think of them as towers. They're right on the edge. Then you have the cavalry, the stables, one set in with the knights. Then you start to get to the people and the figures of your kingdom with the bishops. Then at the forefront, the most powerful piece, the queen, and the most important piece, the king. Let's try and get these colors correct. There you go. So 2 bishops, 2 knights, 2 rooks, 1 king, 1 queen, and 8 pawns. That's what makes up a chessboard, and that's how each piece moves.